Hello? Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. We are actually not going to begin at this very moment. So if you will notice in the program, we're just taking about 15 minutes to settle in. The program will begin at 4:15. While you're here on time, thank you. We invite you to have a drink and some food. And so please go ahead and make your way to the bar. It's all included. It's on us. So please go ahead and get some food so that it doesn't go to waste. Bring it back in. Meet your table mates. Introduce yourself. We're very glad you're here, and we're looking forward to having a conversation with you. And again, we'll begin promptly at 4:15. Thank you.
Test, test. Vlad, can you hear me? Test, test. Check 1, 2. Hello. Testing. Testing 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Check, check. Test 1, 2. Test, test. Check 1, 2. Testing 1, 2. Perfect.
Well, Matt, I think it's what is what? I don't know. The digital announcement is officially. Oh, did it go? Okay, cool. Oh yeah, I know her. Yeah. She's ambitious, but very, very.
Let me get it out of the way.
Yeah.
Shawn, what's happening? Be tapping. Thanks for doing this.
Oh, yeah.
Feel free to adjust that. if-
Crack, yes.
So you know the mics are on right now, so you're gonna have the mic on.
So how long have you been in Duval?
Total about 3.5, 4 years. I went to work school for 6. I'm like a gap in between.
Yeah, I'm starting to work with them. We are in negotiations. Like we have had like 4 different meetings, and now we're at a point of doing RFP and sending them the RFP for approval. We work with the visual.
On the live stream with the glass of wine. You ready? Walter? You ready? All right, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen. All right, well, thank you very much for joining us today. The session is entitled, Does Personalized Learning Actually Improve Student Outcomes? My name is Phil Poekert. I'm the director of the University of Florida Lastinger Center for Learning, and also project director of the Virtual Learning Lab grant project, which is hosting this session. We are very glad that you're here joining us. This is the second year that we have conducted such a session at AERA as a part of the dissemination efforts on the IES-funded center grant that we've received entitled the Virtual Learning Lab. I am accompanied by the principal investigator, Dr. Walter Leite, also from the University of Florida, and we have a panel of distinguished guests who will be introducing themselves shortly. But we wanted to give you all the chance to introduce yourselves. And so we actually are going to go the length of going around the room and having each and every one of you say your name, your organization, and maybe if you could do this in 5 seconds, literally 5 seconds, just maybe why you came or what personalized learning is to you, okay? There is a wide range of definitions, and so in the interest of time, please do keep it very brief, but we do want to know who is in the room and the various perspectives that you're bringing to the conversation. We understand that personalized learning is defined in a number of different ways, and so it's a good place for us to start just to be able to level set things, and so we're going to go ahead and do that. And so why don't we go ahead and get started with this gentleman here, and we'll make our way around the room. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Leite, and I am a new assistant professor at East Stroudsburg University. I just came out of the school district where I was an assistant superintendent in a district working on implementing personal learning, and I also wrote my dissertation on aspects of personal learning.
Hi, Bill Clavelli. I'm with Liz. I'm from Lehigh University. I'm the dean.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you, and good job on keeping time, everyone in the front row. So back over here.
Hi, my name is Val. I'm a third-year PhD student at TED at the University of Florida, and personalized learning is, for me, it's using intelligent systems to improve student learning outcomes, and I'm here to support Dr. Leite and the project. Hi, I'm Katie McCarthy. I'm a new assistant professor at Georgia State University in Zach. I'm interested in education technologies, computer systems.
Hi, I'm Eric Toshal, Senior Director of Impact at KnowledgeWorks, where I direct Student-Centered Learning Research Collaborative, formerly a project of JFF, and we're just moving over to KnowledgeWorks right now.
Hi, I am Jen Shi. I am graduate student from University of Florida. I do research in terms of individual differences, which is also related to personalized learning.
My name is Matt Summer. I'm a PhD student at the University of Florida. I'm here so I can learn more about the answer to that question. I'm John Hampton. I'm a second-year PhD student at TED. I was an English teacher for about a decade, and so I've seen personalized learning through that process done correctly and then done really poorly. So curious to see.
Thank you.
I'm Victoria Lowell. I'm at Purdue University, and I'm particularly interested in user experience in an online environment, and we're doing personalization of courses. I'm interested in user experiences with that.
John Brokaw, graduate of Purdue University, and I'm really affiliated.
Hi, I'm Mary Erin. I'm an associate research professor at the Center Student Partnerships and Teacher Preparation at the State University. And our professional development school models and problems and goals for students. We support multi-age and context-based education, so moving away from traditional education to no grades and no grades.
Hi everyone, my name is Kunja. I'm from Georgia University, and I'm a PhD student. Recently, I'm working on the hands-on autonomy support artificial intelligence on students' intrinsic motivation.
I'm Julia. I'm the director of Organizational Innovation at the University of Pittsburgh. I'm interested in personalized learning and project-based learning in engineering education.
I'm going to interrupt really quickly. We have a few people watching as we're streaming, so I want to make sure they can hear. Who's in the room?
Feel so on the spot. I'm Tiffany Roman. I'm an assistant professor at Kennesaw State University. I am here because of instructional technology. My colleague, Anissa Vega, studies personalized learning. We're starting a personalized learning endorsement in our department. And I also attended Montessori from 18 months to 8th grade, which has a personalized learning approach.
Hi, I'm Matthew Wilson. I'm also at Kennesaw State University, UF grad, and I'm here for similar reasons to Tiffany, except for the Montessori learning.
Hi, my name is Albert Ratapt. I'm a faculty member at UF. I'm here to support my colleagues and also to learn about that question.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Don Kim. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Florida. And I'm working for that IES grant, but I'm attending not just because I'm working for it, but my research focuses on learning analytics, and I'm so excited about seeing the connection between learning analytics and personalized learning.
Hi, I'm Corinne Manley from the University of Florida. I'm also on the project, but I'm in measurement, and so I tend to think of the measurement side of personalized learning and how those things combine.
Hello, I am Tara Mathian. I'm a clinical assistant professor at the University of Florida in the College of Education. I work and direct the Unified Early Childhood Pro-Teach program. So the Montessori thing, early childhood is largely based in the idea of personalized and individualized learning. So that's what I'm here for.
Hi, my name is Natalie Hagler. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Florida, just about to finish up, yay. And I'm also on the research and evaluation team at the Lastinger Center, and I'm here because there's always so much happening that I never know enough about what's happening. So this is a really good way to be immersed in answering the kinds of questions that we see before us.
Hi, my name is Young-Sung Lee. I'm a PhD student in the University of Florida, and I'm advisor of the Dr. Leite studying there. And I'm here to find out how to my knowledge apply to the personalized learning improvements. So I'm happy to meet you all.
Hi, I'm Phil Winnie from Simon Fraser University near Vancouver, British Columbia. I'm interested in self-regulated learning, which I think is pretty personalized, but I'll find out.
I'm Mike Ware. I work with Algebra Nation, which is one of the platforms that's being analyzed under this IES grant. And we're, of course, very interested in personalized learning and how we can use it to improve our math learning platform.
Yeah. My name is Lucio Christoph, and I'm with Algebra Nation too.
I'm Sidney DeMello from the University of Colorado Boulder. I'm studying engagement and affect in the context of this project. But I'm really here for the food and alcohol, frankly.
Hi, I'm Danielle McNamara. I'm at Arizona State University. I do work in creating tutoring technologies and natural language processing. I just recently joined this project, and so they made me come here to drink.
I'm Pane Kendeu, professor of educational psychology at the University of Minnesota. I think I'm here because of Danielle, but I'm also developing individualized interventions to improve comprehension, and I think those are personalized learning experiences, but I guess we will find out.
My name is Matt Bernecki. I'm coming from the University of North Carolina, and I'm also going to do a placeholder introduction of Candace Walkington, who's at Southern Methodist University. She's coming in a bit. Together we study personalized learning in math contexts, where we personalize to students' out-of-school interests and career interests. Oh, and so far the answer for us is yes if we do it right.
I'm Alex Bowers. I'm at Teachers College, Columbia University, and I work at the intersection of school leadership, data analytics, and data use and practice.
Hi, I'm Sarah Weeks. I am a PhD student at Teachers College. Before starting my graduate work, I saw various attempts at personalized learning, so I am curious of your definition and the answer to that question.
My name is Rachel Hughes, and I live and work here in Toronto, so if you need restaurant recommendations, I can help you. I work at the Bishop Strawn School, which is an all-girls independent school here in Toronto. I am the vice principal of the junior school, and so I'm interested in this question, but how it relates to younger children, like elementary age school children, in an inquiry-based setting.
Hi everyone, my name is Kang Xue, and I am a PhD student at the University of Georgia. And I come here because I served in this program during the last several months as an intern. And what I'm doing for this research is using computational psychometric method to remove the bias caused by the non-ignorable missing values. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Shu Yuan, so I'm the assistant professor from the University of Georgia, and my research is on computerized adaptive testing and adaptive learning design, so I'm really interested in how personalized learning can actually improve student outcome.
Hi everyone, I'm Yawei Shen. I'm a PhD student at the University of Georgia, and I'm here to learn more about this question.
Hi, this is Mohammed Al-Raifi. I'm a PhD student in Albany, New York. I'm interested in mobile learning. That's why I come here.
Hi, my name is Manaz Fazal. I'm from the New York Institute of Technology. I'm an assistant professor there. And I'm really interested in how do we measure this question to come up with the best answer to this question?
Hi, I'm Joan Hughes. I'm a professor at the University of Texas at Austin. My work is focused on K-12 technology integration as well as pre-service teacher education preparation. So I'm interested in this topic in relation to both of those contexts.
Hi, my name is John Downs. I'm the director of the Tarrant Institute for Innovative Education at the University of Vermont. We work with dozens of schools around the state, in the last 5 years in particular, helping them implement statewide legislation for personalized learning plans, proficiency-based assessment, and flexible pathways to learning.
Hello, I'm Nicolette Van Helem. I'm from Europe. I'm from University of Amsterdam, and right now I do research at University of California, San Diego, into the transition that schools go through when they start with learner-centered education. So we focus on the systemic perspective, the interaction between leadership, teaching, and class and student learning.
Hi, I'm Becca Runyon, and I'm from Macmillan Learning. I'm Director of Assessment and Reporting, and we're just interested in the answer to this question.
Wonderful. I think we got everyone in the room, save Christine Salama, who's also working on the project and is figuring out the live streaming session. So I'm going to turn it over to Walter in just a minute, but I wanted to share with you a quick overview of what we're planning to do with the session. And so welcome you all once again. We intend for this to be a much more interactive session than many others that you may attend. And so wanted to give you a quick sense of the agenda here. We're going to turn it over to Walter. He'll have our panelists introduce themselves, and they'll launch into this moderated focus group. While you're hearing that, I want you to be taking notes in regards to what you've heard and how you might respond to the questions that are posed to them. Because after this focus group, we're going to turn it over to you all in order to engage in some tabletop discussion around those very same questions. And at the end of the session, we'll have a representative from each table share some of the thinking that surfaced within that table, and then our panelists will then respond back to you based on what they heard from your discussions, so that there's a bit of back and forth here between the audience and the panelists to have a much more facilitated discussion on the topic. So I'll be serving as sort of the master of ceremonies. Walter's going to be serving as the moderator, and we'll turn it over so we can kick this thing off.
So hello, everybody. Thanks for coming. So I am Walter Leite. I'm the principal investigator of the Virtual Learning Lab, and we are doing research on personalized learning, both methods, effects, and the context of personalized learning. So it's a broad center, and we have invited speakers here to illuminate us about what effects can we see on student outcomes. So I will turn to the panel to introduce themselves, and then we will have some questions that will hopefully generate more questions and more discussion from you in the moderated part in the tabletop discussion part of this session. Okay, so let me start with Shawn.
I'm Shawn Wigg. I work for Duval County Public Schools, which is the 20th largest whole-size district in the nation. I serve as a director of K-12 mathematics and also co-lead up our curriculum innovation team.
Hi, I'm Jodi Davenport. I'm the deputy director in the STEM program at West Ed, which is a nonprofit research and development agency based in San Francisco. My background was in cognitive science, but in my past decade I've been working at West Ed. I've been doing work related to personalized learning, including simulation-based formative assessments for science, online chemistry, virtual lab activities that adapt to where the kids are, and a learning linkages project with Danielle back there, where we tried to take multimodal data streams that included some classroom data along with log data in an intelligent tutoring system and make sense of it. And then my group has done some other work, and this is maybe a different version of personalized, where some people are working about making culturally relevant science learning for people in indigenous populations, so it's a different kind of personalization. We also have people in our group that do evaluations of schools that are adopting personalized learning systems, such as the Summit PLPs, or just different learner-centered kinds of activities as a district-wide initiative or school-wide initiative. So thank you.
Hello, my name is Ada Woo, and I work for ACT. You might be wondering, what is ACT doing here in a personalized learning panel? So I work in the division at ACT they call ACTNext, and we are an internal innovation hub for ACT. So ACT is actually exploring other ways to do assessment, namely blending learning and assessment, maybe with technology-enhanced platform to deliver learning content, and at the same time go in a more formative route, that as we're delivering you the content and you're interacting with the content, we want to get some information about the learner, whether you know or you don't know. So this is actually a really good topic to talk about, and I am Senior Director of Strategy Implementations and Operations at the unit, and my background is in psychometrics.
So when we were planning this, and I posted the flyer on my Facebook page, a friend asked me, well, what's the answer? And I said, well, it depends. So we're here to see what it depends on. So our first question for the panel is, what dimensions of personalization affect student outcomes? Are certain student outcomes more malleable? Shawn, would you like to start on your take on this question?
Sure, I feel like I would be doing a disservice if I didn't say math was the answer for subject choices. But in all seriousness, math is one of the easiest subjects to begin this process with. And when we think about personalized learning, and that means a lot of things to a lot of people, it's not new. The idea of giving a kid self-directed learning and things that are aligned to them is not something that came up in the past 365 days, 5 years or 10 years. It's good quality instruction, right? So in our district, one thing that we've done is we've leveraged multiple resources and tied them together into digital platforms that are connected to make the teacher a better end user for allowing that experience to occur for the student. While we wait for technology to continue to evolve, and there's going, I'm sure, to be a lot of discussion on this platform produces this and it gives this kid this prescription, that idea is not new. So what we tried to do is put our tools and resources in the hands of teachers in such a way that they could actually prescribe things to students to personalize their experience in the classroom. And then we've evolved that to the school level to give students a prescriptive and personalized learning plan. But a lot of times when I see personalized learning plans, I often see a school schedule. And I don't know if I really would call that personalized, but it is a part of that process. So for math, for example, we want to look at, we're trying things with a tagging model. So when we talk about why can a kid not solve equations, it's not that the student can't solve equations, he just misses every single one that has a fraction. Well, is it all fractions, or is it just fractions where the numerator is greater than 1? There's a lot of sub-questions that we're trying to dive deep into to see. With math, I liken it to getting my car serviced, and that's about as much as I know about my car. As I take it in, they put it on a machine, and they say there's something wrong with your transmission. And that's something you obviously don't want to hear. But I can't fix it. They need to fix it. And how many times have we had to go back multiple times, right? We know it's a transmission, but what I thought was this piece of it is incorrect was not the issue. So when I think about what's really important in those dimensions, we can't leave content out of the conversation, because we can't just have a machine that churns and burns students out to a resource that has the right title. If you stick a kid on Khan Academy and say, go, and your textbook says literal equations, they will never find the right resource for literal equations because it's not called that. And then once they find out that it's called rearranging variables or rearranging formulas for math, is it really that issue? Is it an ongoing issue that the rearranging component is the issue, or that there were fractions in there and the issue still resolves for math with fractions? So I find math to be a little bit easier, only because it's so binary in the way that it is structured, and it's a coherent, beautiful story, that if I can find out what part of the story that they didn't fully understand, they'll be able to pick up in the chapter that they are. So I know it sounds like English, but in reality for me, I believe mathematics is one of the easiest ones that is adaptable to this idea of personalized learning, because it is so concrete And it is more like a prescriptive medicine where if we can identify what the issue is, then we can easily fix it. And you see bigger leaps and bounds on the end results. And our district has scored substantially high on the recent NAEP assessment, National Assessment of Educational Progress. We dominated in a lot of those areas. And I believe it is because of some of the work with our resources that we've done.
Mm-hmm. Jodi, would you like to give us your take on that question?
Yeah, again, it's an interesting question because I think it could be answered in so many different kinds of ways in terms of just the dimensions of personalization. Some of the things I was thinking about are even just things that can encourage students to have greater engagement and motivation. So a lot of times, I think this is an interesting distinction between thinking of things completely as just your interaction with one child and the computer versus thinking about realistically what happens in classroom settings where the kids are not just interacting with the computer, they're interacting with their teacher and each other and in groups and sometimes as a whole class. So I think that there's an engagement is really important to try to connect what you're doing with something that's authentic and meaningful to the students. And so I think that that dimension of personalization in terms of making it personal, making it things that are really relevant. I guess if your answer is math, I could say my answer would be science because I'm working in science, and I think especially with the next generation science standards, there's really this emphasis on trying to connect across all the different grades in terms of having these cross-cutting concepts and having disciplinary core ideas that really build on each other. And if you had a really powerful personalized learning system, you would be able to really think about mastery as not just something that happens within a year, within a unit, but really across time and where the students are over all of the years. So yeah, I think that's an interesting possibility. I think it's hard to say what dimensions are, I think that the answer is, I think of course it depends, because if you make something that's tailored to students where they are in terms of what they already understand, and you understand something about what prior knowledge they have that you could build on as an instructor or as an instructional system, that's really important to help them content-wise. But I think you can't forget to try to make it personal, relevant, and meaningful to them, because I go to the classrooms a lot, and I was just in the classrooms a lot this month, and you can see the disengagement level is high. There's so many competing demands on students' attention right now that if you don't get them present in the moment to even engage with the system, then nothing else is going to matter. So.
Okay, Ada, would you like to?
It's kind of great to go last.
Yeah.
You kind of say a lot of things I wanted to say. I mean, so I think science is a great platform. It's a great content to learn. And, in terms of engagement, I think I couldn't agree more with what you just said. Like, the student have to find it useful to them and meaningful to them in some way. So I think my answer is social emotional learning content. I mean, it's like, I was just in another conference, in the OLC Innovate conference, and I heard one of the educators said in the conference that all learning is social. You kind of learn together. And one of the projects that we're doing back at ACTNext is we're developing a prototype platform to teach science in a collaborative problem-solving context. So students work together to solve science problems, and it's, as you're solving these problems, you're also learning, and we've gotten pretty good results from it so far. We're piloting it in a few schools. So I think combining the social emotional learning element into the content, like math or science or literature or whatever, making it meaningful and relevant to the students, I think that's important.
Mm-hmm. Would you talk a little bit more? You mentioned social emotional in terms of affective states. Are these, in terms of affecting student engagement, how high of a bar is that as compared to like science or math? Would you talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, social emotional learning, that's a tough way, right? Because, I forgot who said that. It might be you, to talk about how we're going to measure if personalized learning is successful. So at ACT, we have what we call the ACT Holistic Framework. So essentially, we map all the things that we do on this holistic framework, that social emotional learning, K-12 education, college education, and and beyond, and we map it all in that context. And that's our framework internally on how we evaluate whether something works or something doesn't work. So of course, I'm biased to that framework, but I think any framework that is good will do. You kind of have to have a priori set of framework that you will measure things against, whether this is working or not working. Because I think, one thing that I see, especially in the ed tech world, is that it's so easy to get sidetracked by what is flashy and what is cool, and then you forgot what you were doing, what you wanted to do originally. So I think it's important to have a set of criteria that you measure it by.
Okay, Jodi or Shawn, do you have a comment on effective states versus achievement? I mean, you guys talking about achievement. What about student engagement? Is that something that, to what extent that is something that as it can be changed by personalized learning?
Do you mean changing their level of engagement?
Yes, yeah. You have experience or reflections on that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't think of them as separate. So I would think that there's just different dimensions of you can't have content learning if the students aren't engaged and motivated. I think it's necessary, but not, they could be engaged and then not learn. Like you said, they could be engaged because it's so flashy and cool, but then they just took home some, ability to click some buttons. So I don't.
Can they be engaged and not learn?
Yes, and I think that's what you're relating to. Well, I think it's one of those things, like they always learn something, like the luminosity, the brain training programs. It's not that you don't learn anything, it's that you learn to be really good at those games. I think that what's key in all these things is that you learn what you practice. So I think getting them engaged gets them to the door, but then you have to make sure that what they're doing, you're only going to learn what you practice. So how are you giving them the opportunities to practice the skills, the reasoning, the thinking is that you want them to learn within your system, and then have that be at a level that resonates with them, so they have that ability level where they know enough to be able to do the next step, but then they don't know so much that then they get bored.
Okay, Shawn, do you have a comment?
I think the engagement piece, like you mentioned, is very important, but I'm going to go back to also a key thing to consider. I know we're talking a lot about the technology and the machinery, but you cannot leave content out of that equation. If we continue to make these really flashy systems that put it in front of kids, like right now, gamification is a big push, but a lot of what I'm seeing now is just games. They didn't make it any different. So I get a lot of calls in my office a lot saying we've got the next greatest thing and it's this really cool game, and I've been shooting foxes and weasels for a half hour, and all I've done is done a couple quick math problems in the middle. I haven't extended my learning or enhanced that. So, but we also need to demand things from publishers and companies in which we get material from as a district. One of the things, if it's not aligned, we don't have the conversation. So like if you're going to bring something to the table as far as we've got this really great, you can't, like for math, we gotta quit doing the same old problems from 1925. And so I will give a shameless plug here to the Math Nation platform. We have used Math Nation in our district since inception it's ever begun. And what I like about them is when you read a word problem, we all know there's two trains leaving from it. How many of us take trains anymore, right? I mean, these kids, some of the kids have never seen a train, other than it depends on where you live. Or there'd be word problems about snowing. I'm from Florida. I mean, there's no relevancy for me to connect to that or as a kid. So one thing I like is that Math Nation not only provides this unique platform, but they update their problems to be what's current with students. So we can, at least from the get-go, not lose students from a disengagement of, okay, I don't care that Joe can eat 8,000 watermelons. Like, that kind of stuff we really have to be cognizant of.
Yeah, so you give me a good follow-up for the second question, and this one I will start with Ada. So it's in terms of context, not only context for the student, but also for the teacher and the school, and also the framework, the software for personalized learning. So the question is, what conditions need to be present in order for personalized learning to have, for personalization to have an effect? So think, broadly, as you give us a little bit about your experience with respect to this question.
Yeah, so I know personalized learning is broader than just technology-enabled personalized learning, but I'll focus my discussion on technology-enabled ones. I think on a very basic level, you have to think about access to equipment. So very recently, so we generally do some kind of survey at the end of the ACT test. So the student would take the test and we ask them some questions. So last couple rounds of survey, we asked them about questions on whether they have access to devices, digital devices at home, and how many. So we published a digital device report, and the good thing is that about 85% of the students that did the survey said they have 3 to 5 devices at home. So that's great, but there's also a pretty large number of students that say they only have 1 device at home, and most of the students that say they have the 1 device is a phone. And not surprising to you, I'm sure, is that the underserved kids, the kids who are poor, will be mostly the ones that have the 1 device. So I think as we are making these learning platforms and delivering these content, it's important to think about, you know, yeah, it's like Chromebook is cheap, but maybe not cheap enough for some people. You know, if all you have is that phone, we have to be more cognizant of how to build the platform so that people can have access to it.
Jodi, would you like to?
Yeah, so I'll take a little bit of a different answer to the same question. So I think one of the conditions that I've been really thinking about a lot is that, so we have a lot of systems that can tell students if they got something wrong. So you understand where they're having problems or where they're having misconceptions. But for something to be personalized, then it's like, so then what do you do about it? What is the instructional next step? And I think what effective teachers do really well is they're able to not just explain something in one way, but if that doesn't work, they have 13 other ways that they can use to explain something to the student about that same topic. And I think one of the things that I've seen that's a little bit lacking in some systems, I mean, this is some of the ones I've developed, including, is to really think about, so how can you not just differentiate the spacing or the, you know, giving students more of the same kinds of problem, but instead offer different ways of explaining the content and different instructional means. And so I really think that if personalization is going to be effective, you can't just diagnose what problems the students have, but you also have to have a repertoire of different offerings that might help that child understand and that connects with something that's in their brain that will make sense to them to help them make that conceptual understanding and move that learning forward.
Okay, yeah, you touched on something very interesting because I was thinking, as you're saying, about the role of the teacher in the personalization. Because again, the student is in a contest, work with a teacher in a certain school. So, you know, I'd like to ask Shawn to comment on that, particularly with respect to teachers.
One of the most important things I feel like from a teacher perspective is teachers want to do well for kids. It's not that they're against that, but when we keep churning and burning through different, this is the new way to do it, this is the new way to do it, I promise this one will work, try these magic beans, try this thing, whatever it is that we're supposed to do. The problem is there has to be a collaboration between the teacher and the administration within that system. And part of the problem is there's always look-fors and it's very binary when these systems are not binary. So one I think what we can do is for developers to develop these things is come up with fidelity measures that are in a language that's understandable to a teacher. What is it that I should do with this software or this program, or how should this look at the end? How do I know if I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing so that at the end of the day we can have fidelity yes measures to determine is it a system issue or is it an implementation issue? I've always believed that, you know, implementation that's ineffective is not only irresponsible but inappropriate. So when we look at those types of things for a teacher, tell me what it is I'm supposed to do with this program, not just what to click. What's the ongoing fidelity measures, and give it to me in a way that I can self-regulate as an instructor, but also for school administrators. We can't, you know, leave those folks out. When I'm walking into rooms, what gets measured or monitored gets done. So I want to know, is there a certain number of minutes I'm supposed to do? Is there a certain way this is supposed to look? And what from the system can give me that information so I can ensure I'm doing what I'm supposed to do on my end as an instructor or as an administrator, so that we can then go back and have a continued conversation with the developer of that program or platform.
Okay, thank you very much. That is a response that goes very nicely to our next question, which is about methodological challenges. So what are the methodological challenges to identify effects on student outcomes, and what methodological innovations could address that? So I will start with Jodi on this one.
Yeah, I think that this was alluded to earlier when people are introducing themselves. I think the biggest methodological challenge is having good measures about what we really care about, not what is just easy to measure. I think that right now there's, you know, if we care about students building, you know, complex ideas and integrated knowledge and being able to clearly communicate with their peers, those are not things that we have really simple, great tests for yet. And I think that's a huge opportunity. And I want to throw out a couple other things. I think another methodological challenge, this is something where we even just dipped our little toes in trying to address, is that a lot of times the learning doesn't just happen in the system, it happens in the context of the classroom, and it happens over time. So you have these multiple ways that learning is happening, trying to connect them, trying to understand which part is happening at the individual level, which happening is at the group level. There's learning happening at the classroom level, and to measure those are all different kinds of things. You can even go beyond, and students are also learning out of school. They might be having some things they're bringing to bear on their learning. So what you're capturing in the system is a very small, very sparse snapshot of what they might understand and learn and where they are. And then another thing that I mentioned before I really care about is that when we have mastery learning, we really want to have a continuum that spans. So I think this is what you're mentioning with the holistic approach, is that you don't want to just have like, you learn this unit, goodbye, now you know it forever. It's that all the knowledge, you want it to be connected, and you want them to bring back those skills every year. And so you want to have a continuum. So measures that not just measure something for one specific instance, but really you can link to other content over time, over years for different students, I think would be really important. So the opportunity is that maybe we could start to build some of these. I know people have been trying to, and I think that one of the things that's exciting about some of the more personalized learning systems that districts are adopting is that there is an attempt to have a more mastery versus performance approach, where you have a continuum of skills and then you have expectations specified for different students at different grades, but a student in any grade could actually be anywhere on that continuum. So it's more reflective of this growth model and not just, oh, you got an F, too bad, next subject anyway, So you didn't learn ratios, well, sorry, but we're moving on. I think a lot of these skills really build on each other, and so I think that there's a huge opportunity to have those more mastery-oriented measures, so we can help students really get to where they need to be and not just fail one thing and then assume that they should try to make it up later.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Ada, you're a psychometrician, right? So particularly interested in your take on the measurement, and also when talking about methodological challenges, the word heterogeneity comes up a lot in how students are using it, varies widely. So I would like to take on that too. So
yeah. So I think, when I was thinking about this question beforehand, what methodological challenge, I would actually like to, even take one step back on the methodological challenge. So my biggest challenge I see in this is data management, because if we are using all these fancy technology to collect all the data, and as Shawn's saying, gamifying learning, what does that mean? Does that mean anything? Does that demonstrate some kind of skill that is of interest? And I'm also seeing in the social emotional learning realm, things are facial recognition, eye tracking, voice, all of these things. So now we're talking about multimodal data. How are we going to store it? So we're collecting all kinds of things. Do we really know what they mean? Do we even have a way to slice it and dice it in a way that is meaningful to us and produce actionable data for teachers? Because if we don't work with teachers, then it's kind of a moot point. So I think, from a measurement perspective, I think the most important challenge that we have now is having a good system to manage all the data that we're going to get.
Mm-hmm. Shawn, would you like to give us your take on this question?
Sure. That's why I love these panels, without even thinking about the question from those two perspectives. I read that and I immediately went to the mindset of a student and a teacher, from the aspect of when I first started teaching, I taught intensive math, and the curriculum guy was just a blank page, and they said, you should know what to do with these kids, right? And so part of the challenge for a student who's struggling, and I'm really all students, but more so our students who are struggling, is that, okay, students don't struggle. Come back on.
I know, I thought the mood lighting would be later.
Oh, okay.
Energy conservation.
Yeah, we didn't really talk about what to do in the event of a blackout.
Okay.
Hey, we're back.
Okay.
Shawn, go proceed.
I'm done. No, for a student, when you talk about personalized learning, and I'm from a math perspective, I think it's also about, you have these great tools, and I liken it to instruments that play great music, but someone's got to come together in a partnership to create the sheet music for the song, right? And so, like, if I'm trying to learn something new with my teacher, and then I work on something that might be on a platform, that could feel like anywhere between 1 to 5 different concepts that I'm working on. And so does the addition of doing that right there in the class, which is usually the default answer is to do it sometime in your class. Does that damage my ability to get to the core if they're not connected? So when we think about unfinished learning, that's one of the things personalized learning is trying to do, is to close those bridges. So the fear and one of the methodological challenge I see is that sometimes core instruction is pursuing their two parallel paths. So how can we get the systems to connect in a way where, when do we do this? If the systems can't connect to support the core instruction, is there a better time or a place or a way that this should be implemented for it to be effective?
Okay, thank you. So our fourth question is the most complex because it considers that as different platforms for personalized learning become available, particularly related to technology and online learning, the teacher has these opportunities, and teachers may have flexibility or may not, depending on how the district is interacting with respect to adoption or not adoption of technologies. And with these opportunities comes also opportunities for teacher preparation programs to react to this and prepare teachers to interact with personalized learning. So the question is, in order to achieve our ultimate goal of enhanced student learning, how should we think about the co-evolution of the roles of teachers and technology as personalized and adaptive learning tools become more readily available? How can research and development efforts support this? So I'll start with Ada on that one.
Yes. So this question, I think technology isn't here to replace good teaching. I mean, I think that, we've all had really good teachers in our past, I'm sure, and as Jodi said, a good teacher, when a kid doesn't know something, she has a repertoire of stuff that she might be able to pull out and say, well, learn it this way, learn it that way, learn it that way. So technology, may not be able to do that, but I think technology, can provide actionable data for teachers to say, take a closer look at this kid, he's struggling, and then have teachers make decisions about next step. I think that's important. So, my thinking is that, in the research development of personalized learning platform and ed tech product, involve teacher from the very beginning. Focus group seems to be a good idea, or even involve teachers in the design process. Like, hey, what kind of data will be useful to you? What will be something that's actionable that you can actually incorporate in the classroom? So I think that is kind of a joint effort. I see the role of the teacher being very important.
Jodi?
Yeah, I think I could not agree more. I was going to say something very similar. I think that really there's a huge need for more of the user experience work. I think that sometimes people talk about, oh, teachers need to learn more about these things, and it's like, well, really, maybe sometimes you need to look at your system and see about how is it really responding to the needs of teachers. And I think especially in now when there's so many different models of instruction being piloted and tested, I think really as researchers it's really our obligation to get into those contexts and see what the realities are of what the teachers are dealing with and what their constraints are, so then to make sure that when we get the data to the teachers, it's useful, actionable, and adaptive to their needs. Because as you said, Shawn, I think there's so many things going on, and if it can't readily provide the data in a way that's digestible and actionable, then it's almost, you don't need to have it there. And I think it's unrealistic to think students are just going to work one-on-one with one-on-one device, because we need students to be creative, we need them to be effective communicators and collaborators with each other. So I think that you do need a teacher to orchestrate it. So I agree. I think really involving teachers more from the beginning, and I think to make systems that are more usable and useful. And then I think as new teachers adopt the systems, it should be an easier on-ramp to using these systems, because they've really been field tested and that they're already meeting some of the needs of the classroom.
Shawn?
I think one of the biggest things is to try and avoid what I call the format painter classroom model, which is it worked somewhere, so I'm going to format paint it and do it in every one of my classrooms for every one of my kids and expect the same outcome. But then when we talk about in theory, where like every kid's going to get something different. That's a hard thing to put into application. So one of the things I really, when we talk about programs or things where we move towards personalization at a more pure format, I really think it's important that you get student input. We talk a lot about O data, operation data. We talk a lot about, I would call A data, academic data, and that kind of scares me with a psychometrician here because that might not actually be real. But one of the things that I feel like we do poorly is X data, experience data. Well, did you like it? Did you have a good time with it? I mean, this is beyond, a lot of times I sit in a room with adults and we talk about what's best for kids. Where are the kids? So one of the things our district has done is almost all of our committees have kids on them. Now some things they can't. We don't need them in our budget hearings because they just don't want uniforms or whatever. But we ask, like, what do you think? And we survey. I mean, when you go to an airport now, you can't walk out of a restroom without some opportunity to press the smiley face button or whether or not I thought it was clean or not. It doesn't have to be this massive, 5 essential survey. I mean, those things are important. But I think if we can collect that student experience data and couple it with what we've talked about, I think you can have a force that is unstoppable. But if you don't ask kids and you don't ask teachers, it will not be implemented well because you're not asking your end user. If you look at the business models and business perspective, they're always asking the customer. We can't go anywhere without being surveyed, right? Because they know the voice of the customer is so important. But when you look at stores like Kmart, who had great customer service data, they weren't looking at their operational data. Here it is. There are other companies that don't look at their experience data, and they're go by the wayside. The benefit of public education is, quite frankly, it is under attack, right? I mean, but it doesn't go away as quickly as a business. So how can we become better as a system to make kids want to come? And I think this is a tool by which we can do that, but we have to do it with fidelity, and we have to do it right by kids.
Okay, so now we're at the time that we'll put you to work. Phil, can you explain what they are, or reiterate what they are in charge of?
Indeed. So we're going to turn it over to you all for about 20 minutes of a tabletop discussion. So you can just reflect on what you've heard, what struck you, what you didn't hear, what questions you may still have. And what we're going to ask is that as a table, you be ready to share something back with the panelists at the conclusion of those 20 minutes. But note that they'll actually, we're going to invite them to come out into the audience and either join you at a table or just kind of float through the audience so that they can pick up snippets of what you're discussing as you engage in your tabletop discussions over the course of the next 20 minutes. So it's 5 past the hour, so in about 5:25, we'll come back together for the whole group discussion. So go ahead and pick it up at your tables, and we'll be with you shortly. All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you just begin to wrap up your conversation, and as you do, make sure you know who will be speaking on behalf of your table. And if you can't decide, I can help you. I suppose it's you. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Well, just raise your hand if you can hear me. Okay, keep it up, because this is the strategy, right? All right, so what's going to happen is keep them up, actually, quite literally. All right, when I say 3, 1, 2, 3, you guys are going to point at the person you think should represent the table, if you haven't already decided, okay? So whoever has the most fingers pointing at them is going to speak on behalf of the table. You ready? On the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, go. And I'll invite the panelists back up.
Improve student outcomes? How do we measure what happens in conversation that helps deepen those individualized experiences that students have? So I don't think we understand as a group at this point what that goal actually is. So that's something that I'm hoping we can get some clarity on. The other thing that we talked about was the idea of equity, coming back to the first table, and equity of access. So in independent schools, in schools that are in high poverty areas, how much technology and infrastructure is actually available, and that brings us back again to that role of small group and real learning face-to-face that happens. So where does that fit in this conversation between theory and practice, and does it silence certain research questions and stop us from moving forward because we ask those kinds of questions? I don't know. So I think we are doing a lot of wondering.
Like many of the other groups, we talked about the dimensions of personalized learning, its definition, and tried to grapple with that a little bit, but we didn't get too far. We talked about one issue. We all seem to agree that intelligent tutoring systems and platforms and things like this shouldn't just be equated to personalized learning. It's more complicated than that. The teacher plays a role. To what extent does the teacher play a role? We talked about how do we support the teachers with the right information, not just all the information, but the right information to make informed decisions about personalizing the learning experience. So that issue came up. What else did we talk about? Okay, we talked about how a lot of other disciplines are working in this space with us, and we might not all be talking very well. Differentiated instruction or universal design for learning and areas like that, they're all working in this same space, but we're not always communicating. In some cases, we're just talking to each other, and that may not be a good thing either. So.
So we also talk about 3 dimensions to this question. So the first concerns student-teacher ratio. So we decided, I think the ability for teachers to meet where students are is actually more important than what specific ratio it is. So of course, like if you have 80 students in a classroom, it's going to make it really hard to do personalized learning, but it doesn't necessarily have to be one-on-one. The more important aspect is whether students are met where they are and taken from there. So that's the first aspect. And the second, we talk about measurements. So we're kind of trying to find this space where between testing scores and just touchy feeling that I had fun. So what's there in between that we can actually measure and see what actually did with personalized learning. So that's the second aspect. And then the third aspect we had is like taking this systematic view towards personalized learning. It's not just like you add an app to your phone type of thing, but it's like updating your entire operating system type of thing. So, and that happens in K-12 settings as well as higher education settings. And she's the expert.
So our table talked a little bit about the, like other tables here, the divide between what is personalized learning and what is personalized learning with technology, and is there actually like a difference between them, and is technology really the best or most appropriate way to personalize learning for all students? Although I was not a math teacher, I taught high school English, and a lot of my students came with previous experiences with personalized learning through a sort of weird website, you might have heard of it, coolmath.com or Cool Math Games. And so I guess the middle school math teacher would assign like each student, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about up there, yeah. So, and it was just a wonder to me as to why that counts as personalized learning, because I'm not even sure that all of the games, although they all seem different, are they actually teaching anything, or is it just a game? So that's kind of the direction that we went on here.
So we talked about many of the same things. The first thing we focused on was the need for a consistent definition, particularly when you're talking about trying to measure something, because I don't think we're all talking about the same thing. And I think one of the really critical distinctions is the role of student agency, because some of what we're talking about in terms of, get students where they need to be or meeting students where they are is talking really about very teacher-directed or corporate-developed curriculum that doesn't give students a lot of agency and is not necessarily that authentic. So we talked a little bit about whether there's a continuum there that we need to work toward, because I think that the student engagement piece plays an important role in the student agency piece plays an important role in student engagement. The other thing we talked a little bit about is what does it mean to know something, because we talked about that. And if we're looking at measuring effectiveness or outcomes, what do we mean by that? What are we looking at? And the panel touched on some of the different aspects or components of that, but I felt like we were always coming back to the content piece, and again, that content piece driving it. And to me, it's very standards driven and not necessarily person driven, but you really have to have an understanding of what it is you want to measure and what the desired outcomes are. Anything else? Okay, that's it.
Thank you, and last but not least.
Okay. Thank you. So I have the great privilege of sitting with some teachers here who were telling me all about the great work they're doing in personalization, and one of the key messages they said is, not making assumptions, that teachers, A, understand when somebody says, we're going to launch this personalization initiative, A, what that means, B, what it looks like in my classroom, and C, not making assumptions that every teacher has a large arsenal of resources that they can reach into. They may need supports for that. And the same with not making assumptions about teachers' capacity. It's also about not making assumption that all students want to learn in a particular way, like they want to be on a computer. So just recognizing that, everybody has their unique and individual needs, and personalization is about that, not just about experimenting with what we think students expect for their education. Another thing, we had Shawn sitting with us, so it was really helpful to pick his brain about some lessons learned in terms of the project that he was doing. So with many people I'm sure that he was working with, and one of the key things he said is, if he could go back, it'd be setting up a strategic task force and thinking about kind of a 3-year plan to roll it out, and involving students and teachers right from the beginning, and ensuring that everybody kind of understood where they were going, how it would roll out, not just launching in, and certainly making sure that when selecting pilot schools, for example, we tend to take our star schools or schools that are already well on their way, and maybe Shawn's consideration is think of schools in the middle that kind of have an interest but aren't quite there, and they can give you maybe a more realistic experience impact in terms of how they could or could not comply with what they were trying to do. And the last, I think, what was really interesting to me was these ladies spoke about the fact that they're expected to do action research, so inquiry-based research in their schools, and it's directly linked to their performance reviews or their evaluations. So if we want to personalize learning for students, we also should set the conditions for teachers to personalize their learning. So that was a real good learning point for me too.
You can hang on to it there. All right, well, thank you very much. And so I would be remiss if I didn't mention that you may have noticed we were short on one panelist. John Pane from RAND was also scheduled to be here. He was way late at the airport and was unable to make it in time for the panel, but wanted to just mention that if you had noticed. Those panelists who are here, we would love to hear from you one more time now that you've had an opportunity to hear from the audience based on the discussion. What reactions would you share?
So when I was walking around, I heard a lot of discussions on, you know, do we know the students are learning more or learning better? You know, how do we measure outcome? I mean, session of the title of the session. And, you know, one of the participants were saying, well, you know, the students seem to be happier, but does happier mean learning more? Is that a better learning tool? So, you know, I feel like that's a validity issue, you know, drawing from my psychometric background. So in psychometric, there's a validity framework that quite popular people to use to make tests, evidence-centered design. And I'm sure many of you know, but for those of you that are not familiar, I mean, essentially evidence-centered design is you ask kind of 3 questions. You know, what do you want your student to know? And what are the evidence that you will need to collect in order for you to say, yeah, the student knows these things? And what are the relevant tasks that would demonstrate that these evidence are met? So I feel like there's some parallel in there in designing courses or personalized learning tool. If a course is already out the gate and kind of, you know, not having that validity thought in the beginning of the design process, trying to retrofit and figure out what does that mean, I think that will be kind of difficult. So, I mean, I just kind of, that was the part that struck me. Maybe the validity decision needs to be made earlier on. And also, you know, we've already talked a lot about it, engaging teacher, because they are the subject matter experts. They will know what are the things that the student needs to demonstrate in order to say that he learned or he didn't. So that was my takeaway.
Yeah, so one of my takeaways was that this question is, we don't understand what personalized learning is or student outcomes, so it's a very confusing question. But I think that maybe a question is I think that there's a sense for if you can meet the students with where they are and get them what they need, that they will be better off in learning. And I think that's something that people agree on. And maybe a slight reframing is like, what are the affordances of technology? Where are the sweet spots where technology can really help us give students a better educational experience and give teachers a better teaching experience? And I think maybe reframing about it, you know, I think a lot of the systems, it's like taking what computers are good at. They're good at quick diagnostics. They're good at aggregating data. They're good at, and I think that Math Nation is a good example of that. You know, they're good at identifying things where common areas of students are struggling over things. So those are great starting points. And then I would also say that another thing that struck me is that this is an amazing panel, I think, for AERA, because I think if you've been to many sessions, you tend to be like birds of a feather flock together. Usually you go to a session and it's all people that are doing one kind of thing and their friends come to the session and the other grad students of those people come. And I think this is a really interesting group because the fact that there's so many different perspectives on personalized learning in this room really reflects that in the educational system we're trying to work within doing educational research, there are a lot of really different perspectives. And I think more of these that brings those perspectives together, and then as people mentioned, bringing them together at the beginning of projects so we can make, as we're doing more research and as we're building theories, we're really accounting for some of the pragmatic constraints, and as people are doing some pragmatic things, they're also building on some theoretical work that's been well developed over time to really improve the work we're doing together. So I think so a couple of groups touched on this, that people do these things and don't talk to each other, so having more forums bring people together from diverse perspectives who don't typically publish in the same journals or go to the same sub-conferences to really have broader brainstorm together about what are the affordances of technology, where are the sweet spots, and how can we leverage them in the best ways in the classroom.
Does personalized learning improve or increase or reduce inequality? Can you all comment on that?
Okay, caveat. If personalized learning done well, I say it's improving equality. I mean, the way that I see it is kind of like what Shawn was saying, right? Yeah, we all have like wonderful teachers in our past that, know how to personalize, know how to teach to me, that help me learn the best way, but not every—
It's a round of applause. And keep it going, because you guys have also been really great participants. Walter, I thought maybe what we could do with the last few minutes is maybe just offer up a brief update as to where the Virtual Learning Lab project is, because
a recommender system for videos, and then we are branching into developing a recommender system for other activities. We are running an experimental design right now where we have 16,000 participants, students, that were randomly assigned to different recommendation systems. And it's running right now. We'll get data